Beautiful. Before we can set up proper AJAX request to our backend, we also need to discuss HTTP methods. So all throughout the course, we have been setting up the GET requests. So all the time we have been requesting resources from the server. And as a side note, every time you use the browser, you actually perform a GET request. Let me demonstrate that. So essentially, you're getting the resource, the web page from the server. So you perform a GET request. So I'm going to navigate to my course API because I want to show some slides. But before I do that, let me refresh. And then you want to look for network tab. And then more specifically to whatever URL. Again, you don't have to do this here. You can go anywhere. Basically, you can navigate anywhere. And the result is going to be exactly the same. Where if you take a look at the request, the method here in the headers is going to be get. What that means is that we are requesting some resources from the server. But like I said, we're not limited to only the GET request. We can also post data, we can modify that, and all that cool stuff. And just to showcase, essentially, how is that going to look like? Well, imagine that you have some kind of URL. Let's say store.com API.orders. And whenever you perform a GET request, you'll get all the orders. Now, if you want to add an order to the server, then you'll send a post request. And notice something really interesting, but also very, very important, where both URLs are exactly the same. And this is something extremely important you need to keep in mind. Just because the URL is the same, if the method is different, the result is not going to be the same. So if the methods are different, then also the result that you'll get back from communicating with one of these URLs is going to be totally different. The post request is looking for a data. So if you send post, you're not going to get back all the orders. Now, if you want to get a single one, then for the most part, the URL is going to look something like this, where you go with URL and then :ID. Basically, you'll pass here the parameter, and don't worry, we'll take a look at that when we set up the put. So put and patch, there are some differences, but I'm not going to talk about them right now. So basically, that is for modifying resource on the server, which again is something we're going to do with our jobs. And then also we can delete. So we'll need to set up the HTTP method delete, and then we'll need to communicate with designated URL. Hopefully I'm making this clear. Now, probably your next question is, okay, but how we can set this up? So here and there in the course, we were using Axios, the library that makes the HTTP requests a breeze. And if we want to set up a GET request with Axios, remember by default, we can just type Axios and it's going to be a GET request, or we can actually type the method. So we can say here, GET. Now it's looking for the URL, so where you want to make the request to, and also the options. Now, in our case, options is going to be headers where we're going to place our JSON web token. And this is going to be because on the server, the access is restricted. So again, don't worry about it right now. I will talk about it later. Just remember that, yes, we'll also need to pass in the options. And remember that there's an entire section dedicated to the Axios. Therefore, I'm not going to spend tons of time on every smallest detail. Now, if we want to set up a post request, so if we want to submit a resource to the server, we go with Axios and post. And then we're looking for URL, resource, and optionally options. Again, if you have some kind of restricted resource on the server, then most likely it's going to be looking for JSON web token. Now, in order to acquire the JSON web token in our application, user will have to successfully log in or register. If you're somewhat fuzzy on this, don't worry. It's going to make sense. I'm just saying that, yes, those options will also set up in this project. Now, for the patch, notice we go with Axios patch URL, whatever we're going to be sending, just like we have over here right now, user object in the login user. So similarly, we'll do with patch. And then for delete, again, URL, and optionally, we also have options. And the last thing that I want to do in this video is just install Axios library. Again, if you need to jog your memory how basically Axios works, please go back to the section where we cover everything from the scratch and in way greater detail. So let me just type here npm install Axios, and we're good to go. In the next video, we'll take a look at the API we are going to be communicating with.